Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Retro Monster Truck Review. My name is Josh Rhodes, and this week we're going to be covering a show that I actually attended, and I promise this is the last time we're going to go to the Metrodome for a while. This is Minneapolis in the year 2003, November 29th, if I'm not mistaken. This was a show that I traveled to as a senior in high school. I was 17 years old, made the road trip with Jeremy Otto. A lot of people know him as Metallica God from back in the old Monster Mayhem days. He was the trivia king. In all the trivia threads, Jeremy knew what he was talking about, and he really excelled in monster truck trivia. On this trip, I met two other people. The first one being Jeremy Waring. Jeremy Waring used to be known as Ultramax in the old MTM2 racing days. He sat directly next to us. He actually purchased our tickets, and we met him at the stadium right before we went into the doors. We actually arrived there pretty late. We missed the pit party, but we sat next to Jeremy. Jeremy would go on to be a tech for Monster Jam, as well as building some tracks for Brian Braunschweig back in the day as well. The other guy, we've had him on the show before. He's back again. This is Robby Haught. He owns allmonster.com, and this was the first time I believe Robby was actually taking photos for a show. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Minneapolis 2003 here on the Retro Monster Truck Review. Everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Retro Monster Truck Review. Special edition this week. We're going to be covering Minneapolis 2003, November 29th to be specific. And Matt, we've got a special guest joining us this week, Mr. Allmonster.com, Mr. Robby Haught here.
Let's meet him.
Hey, nice to have another Monster Truck podcast going on here. I am excited, man. This is a very special show for a lot of us, and one that I'm going to have a lot of fun looking back on.
Oh, yeah, and this is special to me because, like we were talking before we got on the air here, this was the first really long road trip that I ever did. I was 17 years old, traveling with Jeremy Otto, a.k.a. Metallica God, the trivia king from back in the day in the Monster Mayhem boards. Me and him took that long road trip all the way up from Southern Illinois, all the way to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it's a trip that I honestly have never forgotten. It was still one of my favorite road trips that we ever did. I don't recommend, though, that you guys skip out on a hotel and sleep in a Walmart parking lot like we did after the show.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. We found out the hard way that you couldn't book a room until you were 21. So
Yeah. Being a young monster truck fan came with separate challenges. You know, I couldn't rent a car either at a certain point because of the same stuff. They didn't make it easy on a kid out here.
No, they don't make it easy on kids at all. Thank God I'm 35 now. But anyway, this show was special because, at least to me anyway, I'm a Gravedigger fan. Robby, you're a Gravedigger fan. Matt, you're a Gravedigger fan. This was the last ride for Dennis Anderson in Gravedigger number 14. And for the Motor Madness years, that's a significant thing because Digger 14 was the truck that really helped grow the audience as far as Monster Jam goes.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, we're talking about the Gravedigger lineage here. Dennis didn't like to stick around in trucks too long when we got into these, early 2000s, late 90s years. Dennis was in 14 for, a good 3 full seasons here, 01, 02, and 03. He must have liked that piece. It was a good piece of equipment, Patrick Bottom design, and then they had kind of their own design for the top cage and everything. It worked out. It was a great truck, performed well after Dennis was done with it as well. Just a great performer all around.
That was a good point that you made there right at the very end. My man CVH, Carl Van Horn, drove the heck out of 14 for many years afterwards. So, I mean, if that's any indication, you got two of the guys in the business that I love them to death. They put on great shows, but man, are those two guys both hard on equipment. And 14 took all the beatings it could handle for that one. I felt like Minneapolis was always a checkpoint, especially the December show. It was kind of, okay, everybody gets a breath, but this is also the start of silly season. It was kind of the transitional show every year in December. So, this was November, of course, because it was way back in the old times. But November, December, Minneapolis was always a little checkpoint, a little breather, and a little, okay, what are we going to see starting in January?
Yeah, exactly. This was kind of like that. Well, you go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was going to say, to go off of Robby's point, this event kind of always was a transition point every year where you have the contractual stuff that usually was done by calendar year. We have Wolverine, still running at this point. It's going to disappear for the year 2004, but we're still here starting the season. Brian Barthel's still in Wolverine, but that's a calendar year type deal. Whereas the monster truck season at this time, it was kind of October, November through, that part of the year type of situation. So a lot of different things going on. And this date in general is interesting because this isn't even a Monster Jam show. This is the US Hot Rod Motor Spectacular is how this event was still advertised back then. This is the old USA show. This is how they used to kick their season off every year. We're only 5 years removed from the USA Motorsports buyout, and the format, more or less, of the event is still kind of the same. You've got arena trucks, you've got demolition derby, and the monster trucks here at the Motor Spectacular.
Welcome to Monster Jam, everyone. I'm Scott Douglas, along with Ken Stout. And hey, we've got the world champ right here, Brian Bartle. It has got to be a thrill to be back home with the world championship, really for the first time in Minneapolis as the champ.
Oh yeah, it's the first time. I only get home a couple times a year, and it's the first time I've been home this season, and bringing home the championship is just the greatest.
Yeah, you certainly do, and a very interesting track design as well here in Minneapolis. First time that they would do what I would call a staggered start Chicago style, where they start head-to-head on the inside of the actual racetrack, and then they chase each other going around. The difference here is this track, this Chicago-style track, was a very, very tight Chicago style because, like Matt was saying, on the outside of this, we have pro arena jumps, we have quad jumps. So the monster truck track was almost secondary to that point. They were really squeezed in as far as the monster trucks go.
My favorite tough truck and my dad's favorite tough truck at that event was the Buck and Nuts machine, which was outstanding. You got to look that one up if you don't already.
Sounds like something you would really like.
It was really good. I'm telling you. I'm just saying it was really good. It was well performing, and you'd never forget that truck. And my dad every time that he went to a show, he would take pictures, but he would only pretty much take pictures of Gravedigger. But I see a picture of Bucket Nuts in here as I'm looking through. This was actually the first show. This was pre-All Monster, and this was the first show that I ever actually took any images of. And to give you an idea of how long ago it was now, we're all old. I shot it on a film camera and had to, scan them in and everything. So that's pretty crazy. Digital was just starting to come in as far as photo technology. But you guys are here for the monster trucks. I mean, to me, the transition wasn't just in the overall promotion of the event, but it was also, this was Mark Johnson's last time in Little Tiger. It was Bartle's last time in Wolverine, as Matt talked about. I mean, there was a lot of, okay, who's going to go where and what? The internet wasn't as big as it was now. So there was really some question as to, okay, who's going to be in what seat next year? And in some ways I miss that. I miss wondering what's going to happen next.
I was sitting on bated breath at the Truck World Monsters Monthly waiting for it to come out every single month because that's how we got our news back then for the most part.
Yeah, it was that website. It was Monster Style every now and then had an update. Later on, it would be All Monster that would lead the way in that. And then there's this other black and green website. I don't know what Monster Blog, I think it is. They kind of pick up the slack every now and then too. Shout out to all my Monster Blog friends. They're
absolutely
great people. This show though, we're talking about a lot of ends here at the beginning of the show. Well, there was also a beginning at this show. If memory serves me correctly, this was the third ever Speed Channel broadcast, which was the new network for Monster Jam. And a lot of people still look at this Speed era as the best broadcasting time in the sport.
Yeah, and they're allowed to be wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I tend to agree because back in the day, I'm still a big proponent of tough tracks. I still love the way Penda ran their events. As far as broadcasting goes, these shows were very entertaining, but they could have been put together a little better. And we'll talk about that when we get into racing.
Yeah, they're good shows. I mean, don't get me wrong, but we have, in this case, an entire monster truck event condensed down into an hour format. It does feel, a little bit rushed because we've got to get through racing and freestyle, and they don't quite give enough time to build some of the drama like the older shows did. And that's something that kind of carried through the Speed era as fields got larger and larger and more trucks. Instead of having an 8-truck field or a 6-truck field on a television show that you're trying to show over an hour, or even tough tracks, they had 12 truck fields, but short runs. We have long races now with a lot of trucks, and there's just not enough airtime to really develop all the stories the same way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there as far as racing goes. Freestyle, it's freestyle. This is a racing-centered podcast. We will talk about a couple of the freestyles from this show because there are a lot of memorable moments in freestyle. But the racing, to me, watching it live, it was one of my favorite racing brackets to really ever play out that I'd seen live at the time. We'll get right into it, though. Our broadcasters for this show, of course, the great Scott Douglas is the lead broadcaster. Ken Stout's your color commentator. And to me, the most underrated pit reporter I think we've ever had in the sport, Matt Steele.
Matt does a great job, and those with a keen eye will realize that Ken and Stout are standing down on the floor of Olympic Stadium in Montreal doing the intro for this show. They recorded this intro a week or two prior when they were in Montreal, because I'm not sure what those guys were doing for Minneapolis. Scott was probably on the live mic, but I don't know where Ken was. They were not in Minneapolis to do the broadcasting. So the interviews you see here with Brian Bartle and some other little segments they do, that's all from the floor of the pit party in Montreal a couple weeks prior.
I was trying to look through some of my older pictures here, and I know, yeah, Douglas was definitely on the live mic. I was trying to double check and see if I could see any images that had Steele in there, because Matt Steele was usually at most, if not all, of the shows.
He was definitely in Minneapolis 2003. I
see him here. I see him here.
He was definitely there. There's a lot of pit reports where he's standing right next to the tires, and you can tell it's between rounds here from Minneapolis. And if you look very closely, way up in the stands, you might see a glimpse of the hat that I was wearing that evening, because I was right on that pit side where the monster trucks were. Robbie was on the other side of the arena, so we had both sides kind of covered.
Yeah, and I will say something about Matt Steele. I feel that he is still, I mean, he's kind of what they would call now, I guess, an internet darling when it came to that stuff. A lot of people really liked his stuff. I did too. And it was even taken to another level when I got to see him and really talk to him a lot in West Leb in 2004. And that was one of the big time speed shows to kick off that year. But when we were there, not everybody knows, and this is no offense to Jeff Bursey and Totosaurus Rex, but if you just threw a name of a truck out there, you're not always going to know, or a name of a driver, you're not always going to be able to connect the dots unless you're really a monster truck nerd. And I just remember we were in one of those classic monster truck circles and just shooting the breeze. And somebody brought up that name, and right away Matt Steele was, oh, that's Totosaurus, Jeff Bursey. He did his homework. He wanted to be great, and he always pushed the limits of what he was allowed to do. Because keep in mind, as Matt kind of alluded to, these are productions, and these are formats that people are playing with when it comes to TV. So they could be told to do something that they don't really want to do, and they have to do it. And then people go, well, why is Matt Steele doing this? Or why is the broadcast like this? Well, it got direction from somebody somewhere. Matt always, I thought, did an outstanding job, was very gracious and very knowledgeable about the sport. And you don't always get that.
Yeah, you don't always get that at all, especially from a pit reporter. I never understood why he got replaced later on, to be perfectly honest with you. I thought that he could really carry a show as far as a live event announcer as well. That's how he got his start. He did a couple of those live event announcing gigs for Monster Jam before he ended up being the pit reporter for television. We skipped ahead just a little bit to talk about the show intro right here. But the actual intro to the show is Ken Stout in an almost an auto-tune sounding voice. The dirt is tacky, the obstacles are huge, and the stage is set for Minneapolis to host Monster Jam. And I don't know, I did not like that little part of the intro right there. And I don't know about you guys, I was not really a big fan of the actual intro leading into this show, just kind of a bunch of highlights with a bunch of clips, really.
I mean, it is what it is. It's kind of setting the stage a little bit here, getting some overhead shots and the trucks and intros, but you don't want to give too much away before the opening credits hit. And I think I'm watching the Monster Jam subscription, as I was doing my notes for this show, and the channel itself is known to have some technical issues on a lot of episodes. So I'm not sure if that intro, was that way originally, or when they converted it over, it kind of messed with the audio for Ken's voice there. It's a little tinny for sure, but I'm not going to hold him against him. He was just reading the script he was given, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold it against him. I am going to hold it against the guy that auto-tuned his voice, though. It was a little bit weird right there. Our favorites announced for the show: current world racing champion Brian Bartle, of course, and Wolverine, Dennis Anderson and Gravedigger, and a little bit of surprise is Medusa is announced as a favorite, but there's a reason behind that. Medusa is actually going to shock this field and take the #1 qualifying spot.
I think a lot of people were uncertain about the track, and it's you would look at it from an outsider's point of view and go, well, it's not that much different than a Chicago style. Well, if you've never done it before and you have this kind of tacky dirt, then you're going to have issues with how hard you want to push it. Medusa, I'll say this: I am not a fan. Just overall, I don't really want to get into more than that. I don't really have much there other than to say it is favored. A conservative approach favors her driving style, and definitely, you saw that in Vegas in the rain show. She drove the track how you should, conservative, and that always worked better for her when it came to racing.
Well, speaking of her really quick before we let Matt jump in here, her crew chief at this time, I believe, is RL. And I think we all know RL race. The guy knew how to work on a monster truck, and he really made her, he tuned the truck to her driving ability, and it really showed and really helped her over the years. And this is kind of the start of that, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. I'm not sure if he was the crew chief here or not. I'm just saying, I believe this is the start of their relationship. And you could tell after qualifying, she had a little bit of boost of confidence right there. As far as Medusa goes as a whole, I'm kind of on Robby's side here. I never really was a giant fan of hers, but I will say she did bring in a lot of female involvement into this sport. And there are still a lot of girls out there that grow up and they see her behind the wheel of that truck and they're like, man, cool, she got to do it, I could too. That's her message right there, is something that I agreed with.
Oh, for sure. I'm somewhat indifferent to Medusa myself. I mean, not a huge fan. I don't have any dislike for her. She was just fine. I never got to see her drive in person. The truck was in Pittsburgh one year. She had a horrible flu, like 104-degree fever, and Chad Tingler filled in that day doing double duty that day in Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, didn't get to see her run, but for the era and the job she was given to do, I mean, I think she did it quite admirably overall. And why don't we head into the field of trucks here, my friend? Who do we got here in Minneapolis?
Well, we'll go ahead and do the field of trucks and the qualifying times. We'll run it straight down the list. Of course, Medusa number 1 at a 28.18, and then right behind her, nipping at the heels, cocked, locked, and ready to rock as always, Scott Hartzok and Gunslinger, 28.34. Then the legend, Dennis Anderson and the Gravedigger, the Icon, 29.66. Raging Steele, Steve Reynolds coming in here at a 30.9 second qualifying time. And right below him is Neil Elliott and Maximum Destruction with a 31.12. Blue Thunder follows that. Tony Farrell, 33.34. Little Tiger with Mark Johnson behind the wheel, 37.72. A bit of a surprise here. Wolverine, Brian Bartle, reigning world champion, 38.16. And then Mr. Phil Foster behind the wheel of Bulldozer has a DNF. And I tried for the life of me when I was watching this back, trying to remember exactly what happened to Bulldozer in qualifying. I can't remember if it just didn't make the line or there was an issue in the qualifying pass.
Robby, what say you?
I'd say pushing my memory. It's been quite a while. I don't remember them saying anything in particular about what exactly went wrong. I do know that it got fixed later on, and then we'll get to the rest of that. But yeah, I can't say that I remember. Typically with stuff like that, if a truck goes to the line and dies, then it's an RII thing, or it could be a battery thing as well. Battery thing is pretty typical, pretty common there when it comes to Minneapolis. Just from a crew perspective, you're not always going to be near the truck. So you got to make sure that if the battery's well charged up, and a way to get the battery off the charger so you don't get it run over. I've seen that too. With Max D, the teammate truck, you always had issues when it came to batteries and things like that. When you run them that hard, they're going to get jostled around. So, that's what I would say, just from history, I'd put it that way.
We got a 9-truck field here, by the way, which is interesting because there's usually, if you're going to have it's usually an even number of field. I can't even talk. Even number of trucks per field. We have an odd number of trucks here with a 9-truck field. Medusa, Gravedigger, Wolverine, and Blue Thunder at this point are all Clear Channel owned trucks. Gunslinger and Raging Steele. Raging Steele is a Clear Channel body, but the truck was owned by Kathy and Scott Hartzok. Maximum Destruction at this time is a Clear Channel body, as well as Bulldozer, but the trucks at the time were still owned by Tom Mintz, and of course, Little Tiger is owned by Brian Bartle.
Yeah, and you're dealing with something as well. The part of the reason for the 9-truck field and a lot of that stuff, Matt and I were talking about the transition as well. A lot of times when this kind of stuff happened and a field looks a little odd, you got to remember they were still hot and heavy into the European Tour at that time. And that was kind of some people's second or third quarter, if you will, of monster trucks. So sometimes a truck may not get back in time, or it may be damaged and they couldn't make the trip out there. There's a lot of logistical issues that went on behind the scenes, as well as, you know, sometimes like we saw later on in Minneapolis, you know, Donkey Kong debuts there, right? And stuff like that. So sometimes the debut doesn't go as planned, or they don't have everything together from a European Tour. And that's why you've got weird, you know, odd sort of numbers. It did make for 3 fast losers in racing, though, which really helped out a few people as we go to the next part.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. Round 1 here, Matt, they lose 1 truck and then 8 trucks come back. So really round 1 just eliminates 1 guy.
Yeah, and as we get through here, I'll have some interesting observations on that as well. And we come back from commercial here. We're at Triple H's Metrodome, as we've been here quite recently on the Retro Monster Truck Review.
Yeah, I mean, he is the game.
I was waiting for that.
So we're coming back. We're getting a little bit of a view of this new track here with Medusa's buy run, and something that's a little interesting. It's not, you know, your typical Chicago style where you're 3 passes over the cars. We still have 3 passes over the cars, adding in that short shoot through the middle first. So a little bit longer than some of these folks are a little bit used to at this point.
Now, one thing to point out, too, is one of these corners is a little bit blocked off as far as vision goes. Why is that? There's a garbage truck in the middle of the corner. That's what they're turning around on one side of the track. The other side of the track, I believe, is a van stack. Not really all that important. But that garbage truck over there, that's something that's going to come and play in freestyle. But vision-wise, it's got to be a little bit of a play on just trying to get around that corner and being able to see all the way around this so you can hit the exit of that corner as well. Medusa's buy run that they show right here is typical Medusa at this point in her driving career. Very conservative, but one thing I did notice was that she was waiting for the rear of the truck to settle before she really got on the throttle, and that's something that really makes a good racer, as far as I'm concerned, is somebody that can get the truck through the middle of the corner with a ton of momentum still behind the wheel. She didn't have a ton of it, but you could tell she was learning it.
For the record, she has a buy run, so she needs to make this a legal run, but it's a great opportunity to feel out this track. But what can you say how impressive it is in a field like this for Medusa to lay down the fast qualifying time? Because again, she's been making her name her first few years in the sport as a great freestyler right off the bat. This racing program is really coming along.
Taking her time around these turns, and as you can see on this track, the turns are very, very tight, so they're going to have to be very precise. She's doing a nice job of that.
Medusa, formerly one of the best-known professional wrestlers in the world, got into monster trucks some 3 years ago, really has only been racing in the winter. Boy, she come along strong.
For sure, you know, she's coming out of the corners. I'd say smooth buy run. No need to push it that hard. You got to make it to the next round to move on. Just kind of get a little feel for the track. You can see, you know, the dirt in Minneapolis seemed to vary each event that they went to. Sometimes it'd be really loose, especially like in the February shows. But these fall shows, it seemed like the dirt was always a little tackier, and we see that here tonight.
Well, weather's a thing, definitely. I don't have to explain that to a guy from the Pittsburgh area. You know that. A lot of moisture in the dirt, and that's something that, I mean, they don't really talk about that kind of stuff anymore. You know, Army Armstrong, it seemed like every Penda show would be talking about the dirt on a straight line course, much less a turning course where it's even more prevalent. And I got to say, Dennis Anderson was a guy that would always talk about it in his interviews, and it's no coincidence that he ends up moving on and figuring out things on the fly. It's one thing to be kind of a one-trick pony and only succeed in a certain style of course. It's another thing to be able to adjust round to round and get better as you go on, so that when you get to that final round, you have your best time of the night.
Now, we get into the actual racing bracket right here. We got number 5, Maximum Destruction, with Neil Elliott behind the wheel, taking on Blue Thunder. And what we get here right before this race is a little interview with Tony Farrell, and he brings up the fact that he thinks he chose the wrong tire cut for this evening. He thinks he's got a way too aggressive tire cut. He's got the big hooking tires, as he calls it. He also says we qualified 3rd. I'm not sure if he had looked at the timesheet wrong or what, but he actually qualified 6th for the evening. I got to tell you, this is going to come into play for Tony in this run.
Yeah, and we can't forget that Tony is now the lead driver for the Blue Thunder team heading into this 04 season. Lyle has moved on in his endeavors, and we are bringing in, what is it? Bauhan's going to come in for this 2004 season in the second Blue Thunder, or was it somebody else that year? I can't even remember. But Tony's the lead guy now, flying the Ford banner.
Yeah, Tony's the lead guy. He's flying the Ford banner, and a lot of people have always said over the years, "Oh, Blue Thunder is basically Feld's equivalent to Bigfoot." Well, he's got the big blue truck ride, and he didn't really have a very good outing right here in racing as far as Minneapolis goes. The only guy the entire night, if I remember correctly, to actually clip a turning pole, and that's going to eliminate Blue Thunder from the entire racing bracket. Tough break for Tony Farrell here. Neil Elliott is really going around these corners, and that right rear is hooking him a little bit. And you can see it in his first entry to the first corner. The right rear kind of lifts up a little bit for Neil, and that's something that the Max D trucks have always fought on a big, really tacky turning course like this one.
Here's Neil Elliott, Maximum Destruction, the 5-time World Championship truck out of Paxton, Illinois. Elliott has struggled in racing of late, even though his freestyles have been phenomenal. And the corporately backed, built Ford tough Blue Thunder and Tony Farrell.
I'm afraid we kind of put the wrong tires on tonight. We got our big hooking tires on. I was used to what the tracks have run here in the past. But, we'll play it by ear. We qualify third tonight, so we actually get to watch a couple trucks and see what happens. This truck's running tough. I mean, it has all year. The Ford's been good to us, and we got some big Ford power here tonight.
Scotty was talking about, and look at the big wheel stand right off the bat. He said he had the good hooking tires on. As you can see, it did a monster wheel stand. Now, these guys will shave off some of the lugs. Upwards of 200 pounds of rubber can come off of some of these tires after they cut them.
This is a brand new style of track. Oh, there's a 5-second penalty for knocking over a turning pole. That's going to cost Blue Thunder right there. But this is a brand new track design. We've never run this before. The trucks almost start face to face, then blast out into what's known as a Chicago-style oval. They have to fly over the cars 3 separate times, and they'll cross the finish line in opposite directions.
Woo, baby!
I'm just shooting the breeze with you, dude, because that was something that I had in my notes. Neil leaning in racing, the whole suspension, the whole lean, the chassis roll, if you will, of that truck played to his disadvantage the whole night. Neil was fighting. I don't want to say fighting the truck because that's disrespectful to crew guys and setups, but in some ways he was placed at a disadvantage because of the way that the men's trucks, Willman trucks are, and it's just something that they eventually figured out for turning courses. But at the time, that second Max D truck, man, that thing was leaning in the turn, and it could get up on 2 wheels. You put that together with the dirt that we talked about, and Neil's sitting there at a disadvantage to begin with. He was doing what he could, but it was pretty obvious that when he got into the turns, he was going to lose time.
Yeah, and he did lose time here. Farrell is actually the first truck across the finish line with Blue Thunder, but like I said, that 5-second penalty takes him out the entire evening. So now at the very first actual race that we have right here, we kind of already know the truck that's going to be sitting on the sidelines the rest of the night. The rest of these races, if anybody can just keep it clean, they're going to move into the next round. And this next race is one between 2 guys that you would probably not have considered to be guys that were going to go deep into this bracket. We got Steve Reynolds and Raging Steele. And then we've got the Little Tiger Machine with Mark Johnson, a battle between number 4 and number 7 in qualifying.
Yeah, Johnson, obviously still very new in this type of environment. We can see he's really, really taking his time through the corners. Steve Reynolds, I'm going to maybe defer a little bit to what you said. Reynolds, having come from the men's camp, was somebody who was kind of expected to at least go a few rounds in racing, and he had won, I believe, the Atlanta show in 2003, which wasn't televised, but
yes,
a big stadium.
To clarify, I wasn't expecting him to go very far in this field of trucks. He did win the Georgia Dome show in 2003.
Oh, for sure, but this truck is good equipment, not necessarily as aggressive as some of the other guys because he is in a privateer truck now that doesn't quite have as much funding behind it. But, he's still good enough to get the round 1 victory here over Little Tiger.
And we will continue with first round action. Steve Reynolds, certainly one of the consistent shoes in the sport, especially on a track that doesn't handle a lot of horsepower. His opponent will be Mark Johnson, new driver again, been a crew chief for years on Little Tiger. Now he's behind the wheel as well as wrenching it. And there's that unique start, Ken. They've never done this before. really facing each other. It reminds you a little bit of Vegas, but in Vegas they're kind of back wheel to back wheel. Here they're facing each other, and then again they break into the Chicago-style oval. Both trucks on the same track, and in essence chasing each other around the circuit with 3 shots over the cars.
Little Tiger went over those cars, kind of got out of shape, and was not staying in the guidelines. Much like that right there, Raging Steele, once again, out of bounds there. I don't know if he'll get a penalty for that or not, but a very, very tight turn and a very tight course. Oh, man, what a great race.
Tell you what, Steve Reynolds in Raging Steele is a veteran. He has won at this level before. It was a year ago in the George Dome in Atlanta. He picked up a huge win, so he knows how to get around these big tracks and the big stadiums.
Yeah, and one thing to point out here, and Robbie, I'm not sure if you remember this, but I could remember this sitting in the stands watching this. Mark Johnson was basically making 2 corners out of 1. He would watch him go into the corner, the rear steer would cut, he'd go straight, then he would cut out of the corner, rear steer would turn. It's like he squared off the corners, whereas Reynolds and most everybody else is just rounding this corner and trying to flat track the rear.
Hey, that's his Monster Jam University is live stadium show. I know in the allmonster.com Monster Truck podcast, we talked with Sean Duhan. This is an example that'll come around to Mark here. Duhan said like his first show was Toronto, and he got to go behind the shop for Sudden Impact Racing and take a couple of hits, and then he went to Toronto. And hey, we're live, pal.
We do this again.
Oh, it's live, pal.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go on out there against these people that have been running for 15 years and see how you do. So, I gave him the benefit of the doubt for that. And, I did notice what you were talking about with the kind of very methodically, mechanically going through the turns. From somebody that's been, parked a truck and then brought it back and parked it again, it's really hard. It is so incredibly difficult to drive a truck, much less on a brand new course and, big time situation. In addition, Little Tiger was always set up for freestyle, and my back hurts watching those old videos of Bartle doing slap wheelies now. I mean, that truck was set up incredibly stiff and was bouncing around, and, hey, great for freestyle. There's a reason Bartle had back surgery back in the day, though, and that's definitely a setup thing. Didn't play to his advantage for any of those things in racing.
As far as Steve Reynolds goes, he actually, like Matt was saying, he came from the Minsk camp. He obviously goes over to the Gunslinger Sable. He's actually driving, if I remember correctly, an old Gunslinger truck, just a different body on it, the Raging Steel machine. A body we'd see come in and out over the years with Monster Jam. One thing that I did notice about Steve here, and Ken Stout actually points it out, is how wide he is taking these corners. He makes one jump, and Ken Stout actually points out that he's not sure, but he thinks he might get a penalty for how wide he's sweeping out, so he can get that nice clean exit, almost grazing the pole as he's coming around that turn. He does this a lot, and another guy that does that is in this next race. Number 3 qualifier, Dennis Anderson and Gravedigger taking on Wolverine right here.
Yeah, we've got Dennis. We get the head-on shot here, and they've got the super-duper buffed-down Goodyears on Digger 14 at this point. They're looking pretty slim, I'm sure, lightweight and looking good for racing, especially on this tacky course. We go over to Wolverine. He's got a set of buff tires on the truck as well, so we're going to see how these two play out in round number 1.
Yeah, and Wolverine right here, too. They do a little bit of an interview with Brian Bartle, and he mentions they're trying out a different tire, and I'm not sure exactly what he meant right there. It looks like a Goodyear tire to me, but like you said, it is very buffed down, and he says that they're a little bouncier. Robbie, you might know this better than me. Was there a different compound of Goodyear that would cause that?
I think he was more so talking about the cut, and he could also be talking about just setup, tire pressure wise. I mean, I can remember, just for a frame of reference again, I do always talk about Chucky and Frank, but I crewed for them. You try to get in their heads. You go for your example that occasionally Chucky would tell me to take 5 pounds out of the rear tires in a straight line course, for example, so that the tires hook up, on the back tires hook up on the ground. You got that less pressure in there, so it's gonna stick on the ground, on the dirt, and you're gonna get that little dinky wheelie and get over the cars. With Bartle, he was always playing with the shaved tires. He was one of the first guys to really have that preference and do it, especially when it came to Wolverine. I can remember shows in Indianapolis where he would do that in the front and the rear. I think he was just playing with setups and seeing what would work, which is, again, kind of a marker of the Minneapolis December shows. The season hadn't technically started yet, even though it kind of did. You aren't going week to week at that point. You could test something out and then have a few weeks to kind of recover, take a look at footage, and figure things out. I think that's what he was doing.
It's a good point, Robbie, and it's a good thing he had the buff tires on here because he cuts this first corner so tight that I think if he had the full cleats on the truck, the pole's going over.
Yeah, I think he actually grazed the material on the outside of the pole. That's how tight this corner was right here. This was a tale of two different races, honestly, between these two guys. Dennis is wild and crazy in one side, and Bartle is smooth as silk in the other, and it's going to end up coming back to bite Dennis. He does lose in the round that he can afford to lose in, but Wolverine upsetting Gravedigger right here in a matchup that they hyped up at the beginning of this show.
Yeah, and there's no question. You know, he was just in Montreal where that truck was working perfectly, had electrical problems, couldn't come back for the final, had a shot at winning it, and did not get it done. Now he'll line up against a very tough Dennis Anderson who wants his championship back.
Here's where that bad qualifying run of Wolverine really upsets the apple cart, if you will, in the brackets. He's got a first-round matchup with Gravedigger and Dennis Anderson, so two of our favorites meet in the first round. The only saving grace maybe, Ken, if they have good runs, is that because of the 9-truck bracket, we'll pick up the fast losers. Boy, Dennis had to pull that maybe back down.
Well, you know, and that could have cost him here if he had to get out of the throttle to get 4 tires back down on the ground. We'll find out if he can get it across the finish stripe first. No, it's not going to happen. And you know, and I thought Bartle was in trouble at the beginning when he had to cut his first turn a little short.
Wolverine's your winner.
For sure. I mean, you look at the run as they switch back and forth on the camera angles because Chicago-style racing has no business being run in a stadium when you get trucks in the same camera frame. But we see the runs coming through. Dennis, you know, goes wide, but I'm not going to say he has an awful run. Bartle just cuts it so tight and so clean that he's able to take the win over Dennis here in round 1. Dennis gets up on 2 wheels, loses maybe, you know, a half a second, but Bartle beats him by more than that margin overall.
Yeah, Bartle, smooth as silk in this pass right here, shows you exactly why and how he won the world championship in racing. And I agree with you as far as Chicago style and stadiums. This Chicago style, though, is so tight that it's actually really good Chicago style as far as stadiums go. At least is what I thought, is just such a tight track. We move on, though. Gunslinger, number 2 qualifier, cock locked and ready to rock, taking on rookie here, Phil Foster. And I wanted to bring Phil up mainly because I actually got to know Phil a little bit when he was driving the Maximum Destruction truck. And a fun fact that I actually found out yesterday, Dan Chichagash, who has been a guest on this show, he goes to the same church as Phil Foster.
That's wild.
So man. I talked to Cheech just a little bit, and he mentions, he goes to church. You wouldn't even recognize him now. He still talks fondly of his monster truck days. He also mentioned to me that Phil is still very well respected and talked about between Neil Elliott and Tom Meents as an incredibly hard worker. He actually doesn't do anything as what you guys would normally think. I mean, former motorsports guy. He actually works construction and carpentry now, and he does a little bit of farming on the side, and that's how he makes his living.
Well, you still got to be around the heavy equipment. You can't get that out of your bullet completely, I guess, right?
Yeah, heck no.
Phil Foster is the ultimate what if when it comes to monster trucks and Monster Jam for me. One of my favorite drivers, period. I don't really talk about that a bunch, but he was always, to a fault almost, a wonderful, nice guy, and drove the living crap out of the truck. He always put out fun vibes, man. People don't even say the word vibes back then, but really, he just was an incredible driver. Picked things up very quickly, always aggressive, good, clean, big hits, and was a fun interview too. When he's driving high roller, he's blowing on the dice and throwing them out there. When he's driving Hot Wheels, he's messing around with the Hot Wheels trucks. He's just always ready to hop in and have some fun. And I really liked Phil here. He went for a moment. And that's the number one thing that I remember about this show, but we'll get to that later on. But Phil, just a great guy. Green in this regard, and, you didn't expect much from him in racing just yet.
Robbie, I was debating on this last night, whether or not I should tell the Quincy story with Phil Foster.
There is no debate. We're here for fun, and I want some fun, and I want people to know about this because if you guys don't know, Josh Rhodes is actually a Maximum Destruction driver.
Yeah, that evening I was. It was a Saturday, I believe, and there was 2 shows that day. And if anybody remembers Quincy and anybody remembered that particular weekend, this was the weekend Carl Van Horn was driving Digger 19. This was shortly after Dennis won a world championship. And the night before, I'd actually got to talk to Rob Nell for a little while. Showed him a few photos that I'd taken on my old, really crappy digital camera that I had. And Rob was very kind and very gracious of it. Got to talk with Phil for a little bit. The next day, they're blowing transmissions left and right in this truck. They tried three separate times to get that truck to actually go that whole show, and they could not get
one
it to
thing.
go.
Sorry, I got to jump in there because I was there too with you. It was drive shafts. He kept slinging drive shafts.
Okay, I thought it was transmissions, but anyway, from where I was going, after the show is over with, I'm just kind of standing there, and I hear Rob Nell just holler at me from the front of the hauler. He goes, "Hey, Josh," and he just waves his arm at me to come over to him. So I follow him over there, and he climbs up into the cab of the hauler, and he actually pulls out a Max D crew shirt, like the original Max D crew shirt. He goes, "Try that on." And I'm thinking, sweet, I'm getting a crew shirt. I put it on. I go, "What do you think?" And he goes, "Looks great. Now follow me." It wasn't until I was halfway across the course that I realized, I think he wants me to go sign autographs for Phil Foster. So to make a long story short, I ended up signing autographs for Phil Foster and Max D. I was sitting next to Carl Van Horn that whole time doing this, and I always thought it was funny that there were so many kids that would go by, "I don't want his autograph, I want his," and he'd point to Carl, and I just raised my arms like, "What? I'm not good enough?" But
well, I gotta throw one more.
Hang on, let me finish. After this was all over with, we go to the back, and I give the crew shirt back, very reluctantly, mind you, because I kind of wanted to keep that. But I just remember I was sitting there, I was staring at one of the rear tires of Max D, and I just felt this big hand hit me on the back. Like, oh my God, it was like almost knocked the wind out of you, hit. And he goes, "Seriously, thank you for doing that." And I look over, it's Phil Foster. That's the kind of guy he was. He thanked me for doing that because he needed to be back there working on that truck to get it ready for the Saturday night show.
I was going to ask about Dominic. That's why I was trying to get.
Okay, yeah, you can bring him up too. His mother actually stopped, pointed at me, and goes, "I don't know you."
Because you gotta think. That's why I jumped in there. Sorry about that. I jumped in there because there's a Gravedigger super fan at the time named Dominic, and he made it on the Speed Channel a bunch of times for being a super fan, all that stuff. He was apparently either from that area or made the trip. And of course, you got to think a lot of people have seen Foster's face, Rob Nell, Tom Mintz, so they see Josh sitting up there and the autographs, and Dominic's like, "Who are you?"
Yeah, and I'll never forget too, there was a little girl that wanted me to sign her like fuzzy stuffed animal, and I'm like, the Sharpie's not going to sign on this. Yeah. And she almost started to cry because I couldn't sign it. And then I started to ink it on there, and then her dad was like, "Never mind," and takes it from me.
Hey, I gotta say, did you sign it as Phil Foster, or did you sign it as Josh Rhodes?
I'm pretty sure there are a few people out there with 2003 and 2004 yearbooks that have Max D Josh by accident.
Okay, well, there's a Gravedigger model out there that has my name and Monster and Gravedigger crew on there. I said, "Are you sure?" It's the same as you were talking about. But one more thing from that show, even though we're talking about Minneapolis, it relates. Actually, we should say that for another time. We should do a Quincy thing. The time that you and I saved Gravedigger.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Yeah.
This race right here, though, veteran versus rookie, essentially, and it's exactly how you would expect it to play out. Scott Hartzok is smooth as silk on this pass right here, and honestly, he just puts Bulldozer away.
You get a little reprieve. If you're going to lose, it's got to be in round one. Now here is the winner from Montreal, Scott Hartzok and Gunslinger, to take on Phil Foster, who was so impressive in Montreal, but now he goes from high roller to Bulldozer.
Two very tough trucks here, and that big Ford Gunslinger has a 557 cubic inch wedge head motor in it versus a shotgun Hemi. Some of the big Fords will have a Hemi motor in them. He has a typical wedge head power plant, but it works so well. And look at Bulldozer.
Phil Foster, again, a rookie, out of the Tom Mintz stable, as we've discussed on previous editions of Monster Jam, in a new truck this week. He's got a tough draw here going up against Gunslinger. Scott Hartzok is really running strong.
You can also see the different shock packages. A coilover combination on the Gunslinger has the spring actually over the shock, so he's chosen to go with a different type of suspension. Worked great for him here, and he's already put a win under his belt, as you mentioned earlier.
He certainly does. Phil's still pretty new at this time, getting more and more seat time every time he goes out and does one of these shows, and he's not looking too bad, but the big gun from Oldsmar is going to put him away here in the first round. The experience is just too much to overcome.
Like we said, this was basically an entire round to eliminate one truck. We move into round number 2, and now we've got a more traditional style racing bracket here, 8-truck bracket. We're going to see Medusa taking on Maximum Destruction, Raging Steele and Gravedigger, your first fast loser, Wolverine and Bulldozer, your next fast loser, and then Gunslinger will take on Little Tiger to round out the field. Blue Thunder, surprisingly, the first truck eliminated in the night.
I find that interesting, guys, and I'm not sure what the rules package was at this point, if it was a penalty or an automatic DQ, but Tony only finished like 3.5 seconds ahead of Neil, and Neil didn't have an awful run. So if it's 5-second penalty, I would think he'd still be the fast loser compared to some of the runs we saw, especially out of Little Tiger. But I didn't really stopwatch these things out to know the whole way. But I would have thought that they'd have stuck Blue Thunder back in there just from, the sponsorship aspect. But,
I'll say from a timing system aspect, and keep in mind, of course, this is years later at this point. I will say there was never any discussion of we put Blue Thunder ahead of insert name of independent truck here. When it came to that, especially with penalties and things like that, it was just okay. Tack on the 5 seconds, and if the the times match up, whoever's the quickest it goes back in. At this time, though, I'm not sure because they were still running stopwatches, and things were a little different then.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should have rephrased what I'm saying is I thought that Blue Thunder was still faster, and then maybe there's another reason why the truck didn't come back. Maybe there was a mechanical issue or something.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Might have to go back and time that and go from there. But anyway, round 2 starts Medusa and Maximum Destruction. A big draw here for Medusa. They're playing her up as like this underdog that is slowly rising right here. And man, I got to tell you, this is a great race for her. Whole shot goes to Maximum Destruction going into the first turn. Second time around, though, these trucks are dead even. And when they come around that third time, Neil, again, has that problem we talked about in round number 1, hikes that rear tire up. And that is the only mistake that he needed to make for Medusa to steal a victory away from Maximum Destruction. And I can attest, at least onto my side of the crowd that I was sitting on, stunned silence when she was announced the winner.
You could just see that Neil doesn't look super comfortable here in the truck. The truck's all out of shape. Every time it lands, it's wanting to hike up, including really after the finish line. It really wants to unload and do some weird things. Medusa just puts in a nice, smooth, clean run. And hey, a tire tread's all it takes, and she didn't beat him by much more.
Here's Medusa. She has really got this place talking with that fast qualifying run. Medusa, who lived a few years in Minneapolis, now will take on Neil Elliott, Maximum Destruction. And this is a big draw, tough test for Medusa. Can she take out the 5-time world champ?
This will be a very tough race. Neil Elliott, a phenomenal racer, great off the line. Medusa, no slouch by any means as we watch the trucks go through here. Take a look at the rear steer. I told you this course is very tight, and the rear steer on these trucks, literally the back tires turning is important. It's critical to get around these very tight turns.
Most of the drivers have just a toggle switch they'll flip to make that rear steer works, gets those back tires through, and Medusa has mastered it well. Neil's in a little bit of trouble. Can Medusa beat Maximum Destruction to the finish line? She did it.
Wow, what a close out, man. Well, he barely got to stop last time, but what a close race.
What can you say about how far this lady has come? Medusa playing with the big boys and comes away a winner. She beats Maximum Destruction.
Medusa, you said earlier that you are concentrating on racing and rededicating yourself to the racing, and you have proven it here tonight. You put one of the big dogs on the trailer tonight in Maximum Destruction. You took him out.
Yes, ouch. But you know what? I've been waiting for this since Red Bluff when he spanked me there. So I was like, man, I'm going to get you sometime or another. And what better than my hometown? But it feels good because now I'm starting to climb up the totem pole, and I'm starting to knock down the big dogs. And, who knows who I'm going to race next? It's like, whoa.
Yeah, you're looking at Medusa, you're looking at Steve Reynolds. Those are the people, like I was saying, that they do smooth, clean, and consistent. They're going to be there putting pressure on you in that last turn, and honestly hoping that you do make that mistake, because then they'll just walk right through the door instead of having to kick it in.
Medusa was so smooth here, it almost made you look like she pressured Neil into the mistake, to be perfectly honest with you. The interview right here, it made me chuckle with Medusa. She goes, "You took out one of the big dogs, Maximum Destruction. You put him on the trailer tonight." And her reply was, "Yes, ouch." I just thought that was funny. That simple 2-word reply from Medusa right there. She's happy she got the win right there. She actually mentions specifically that she's been waiting for that victory since Red Bluff when Neil spanked her right there. So it's cool that they're calling back to a non-televised show. So that he beat me there, so I wanted to make sure I got him here.
It's good stuff for sure. I kind of wish that they would have let Medusa do a little bit more promo work on the mic here and there, because she can do it, and I think it would have allowed her to even grow more with the fans than she already did, because she's perfectly capable of talking more smack than that. And I think she maybe gave Neil a pass there.
Yeah, probably just a little bit. Next race though, Raging Steele and Gravedigger. Honestly, on paper, you kind of can see which truck's going to win right here. But Raging Steele got a very smooth pass here in round number 1. Douglas explains that Dennis knew he could afford to lose in round 1. However, there are no more breaks here. They say that several times between several different rounds of racing right here. Reynolds gets a whole shot on Anderson. He leaves extremely hard off the line. Dennis immediately, though, shows how much he's calmed himself down as he makes probably the best first corner of the evening, but then directly bounces hard on the nose on the exit of the corner, actually catches some of the tough truck ramps over there. But this is kind of a battle between guys that are taking really wide corners right here. Dennis ends up getting the win, but it's not really all that much over Steve Reynolds right here. These guys are kind of showing you how this course is progressing as they start taking those really wide corners, and they're showing you that the momentum on the exit is what's really getting these trucks some quick times.
Steve Reynolds, a driver who can handle a course like this well. Raging Steele out of Paxton, Illinois. The opponent here, though, is the Icon. And Dennis Anderson knows he lost in the one round he could afford to lose in. The first round with the fast loser rule. No more breaks like that in this bracket unless there's some breakage, Ken.
Well, you know, we got to go back to that loss. He was coming around the last turn, took it a little too tight, a little too fast, got it up on the 2 tires in the bicycle deal, and he'll have to fix that this time. Dennis very, very good at fixing problems the first time. You give him 2 looks at this track, he's going to be tough to beat.
You know, Dennis with that dirt track mentality, really hanging out in the turns. Reynolds likes to stay a little more controlled in the turns. We'll see how it pans out as they head for home again.
Oh, beautiful turn. Beautiful turn. Way wide, chopped off the end, got back on the throttle. You couldn't, I mean, that was textbook right there, and that's because he made a mistake the first time out. He corrected it, came back a little quicker, a little faster, and wins this one.
As you see Dennis hit those, pro arena truck ramps, you sit there and go, oh no, this is, the kind of opening that a guy like Reynolds needs to be coming in and stealing a win. But we see when they come back across, the race is still, thankfully for Dennis's sake, is a lot closer. And I can tell you though, Dennis is still pushing hard. He comes through that last corner and it wants to rock up a little bit coming out of the corner this time on 2 wheels. And he kind of just drives through it.
He drives through it, and then at the end of the track, he actually bumps the dumpster from trying to get stopped.
Yeah. There's a reason why 19 ended up having a lower and more forward engine, and it's courses like these that really pushed that and really showed the difference, between a maximum destruction setup and a at the time Gravedigger setup. Dennis could only push it so far before he'd high side it, get up on 2 wheels. And when you're looking at a course like this, that was the way that you could. People would say, "Oh, well, that's just Dennis being Dennis, typical driving." Not necessarily. He's the one there that figured the track out and figured out how far he could push his truck in racing and get it, still get it across the line first. The second turn and second jump was faster than the first, and the third was full hammer down. He was building up momentum, like you were saying, Josh. That's the idea. And wide and fast is how he used to say it in the interviews. He would go wide and fast. He seemed to prefer that and had enough control to usually get the job done.
Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
People don't give Dennis enough credit for how much of a true racer he really is. I mean, people were going to say, oh, it's just his wild driving style. But Dennis is pushing the truck as hard as he can, through each round to get the win. That's why the wild driving style surface so often. He wanted to go out there and win. And Dennis is one of the most competitive guys out there. And we've seen it on TV in times when you go in the pits. If he feels he got a raw deal, or if he messed up and, kind of took his own shot out in the race, he would get very, very upset about it. And he would let it known to all the people at home watching.
Yeah. And honestly, this racing bracket is Dennis Anderson to a T. Nice. I recommend anybody that has the Monster Jam subscription on the YouTube channel. Plug to them, by the way. It's a great subscription service. Only $4.99 a month, I believe. You can get that, and you can watch everything you want to see as far as the Speed Channel broadcast goes. I recommend you start right here, because this is a great racing bracket for Gravedigger, and it's a great racing bracket, period, to watch. We move on. Wolverine coming back to take on Bulldozer right here. Fast loser Bulldozer. A little bit of surprise right there for Phil Foster to come back as a fast loser. But, man, he's getting an education tonight. First round, he has World Finals runner-up in the first Las Vegas World Finals, Scott Hartzok. Now he's got the current world champion.
Yeah, we see, the rookie against the seasoned veteran at this point. And I'll tell you what, up until the last corner, Foster's got his number.
Yeah, Foster leads this the first couple of times by, and Bartle actually has to basically make a comeback right here to get the win by about, I believe he had a 2 truck length deficit that he had to come back from. And Bartle comes back and just, man, I tell you, it's one of the greatest races you're going to see from Brian Bartle right there. He knows he's behind, and he has to really cut a corner to make it up on the Bulldozer machine.
Rookie Phil Foster out of the Tom Mintz stable from Paxton, Illinois. He'll bring Bulldozer to the line against the world champ, Brian Bartle and Wolverine.
Brian Bartle's going to do his job here and try to get into the next round. Of course, Phil Foster had one of the most amazing saves we've ever witnessed at Montreal in freestyle, but that's a whole other story. We're racing right now.
Again, the unique course here in Minneapolis. Brian Bartle with a great hole shot. That Chevrolet is cranking. Although, hey, right there, when they crossed the line the first time, Bulldozer had the edge.
You're exactly right, and he's going wide, just like Dennis Anderson was doing and chopping that turn off. Rear steer working perfectly on that truck. Looks like he might be in a little trouble there on that last turn, though.
Brian Bartle heading for home, looking to win round 2, and he does. Right there, you can see the distance. He had it by about 3 or 4 truck lengths over Phil Foster and Bulldozer. The experience of the champ pays off.
These are 2 huge what-if guys that I just would have liked to have seen drive for 10 more years than they did. And Bartle did the same thing as Anderson in the sense that the second hit was faster than the first, third was faster than both of them, and all out. They finally kind of started to figure it out, I would say, by the second round. You know, at that point, they've had a qualifying pass, they've had a first-round pass, they've gotten to see a bunch of other people run from the trackside view, if you will, in the cab. So they're seeing how other people are taking the turns, and they're going off of that. Bartle is just always processing this information and using it to his advantage. So it's about the momentum. That second and third hit were the ones that are a big deal.
Now, I want to point this out too. If you guys, when you guys watch this back, did you catch what I caught at the very end of this race? The silence tells it. Bartle, to me, clearly misses the final jump with the right front tire.
He gets it. I mean,
he didn't get the base of the tire on the jump, and the rule was the base of the jump. He drove up the side of it.
What's the base of the jump? You know, he gets right front up the ramp. I'd say the whole way. I mean, the outside of the tread maybe was outside the edge, but the inside of the tread goes up the ramp. In my opinion,
to me, the whole side of that tire is off, and he just kind of drives up the side, and he gets. It's not an obvious penalty because of the way the truck looks in the air as he comes over the cars. To me, it's an obvious penalty just from the way that they show it on camera right there. A nice tight close up. He's driving up the side of that jump. That, to me, that's the 5-second penalty. That's just my opinion.
You've been hanging out with the Trigger King guys too much, trying to give people penalties they don't deserve.
Oh, I see. Okay, we're gonna throw the RC swag out there. All right.
I'll say this again from the perspective of timing system and stuff later on. It's a lot different, you know, now than it was then. You know, you're running stopwatches and people making calls based on their vision, not necessarily always having the benefit of replay. You could you know make a sports ball analogy for any of that stuff too. Do you have, you know, when you're refereeing a basketball game or something, everything's moving so fast, you've just got to make a judgment call based on your eyes, and you didn't have the benefit of, you know, replay and getting to see the face of the ramp 20 times and things like that. So, hey, sometimes it's just a judgment call, and, you know, in this case, there wasn't I don't think that it was you know, directly against one truck or the other as far as favoritism or anything like that.
No, I don't believe it was a favoritism call. I believe they just honestly missed it. Yeah. They didn't get a chance to go back and look at it. But to me, it was a clear call. Next round, though, Gunslinger and Little Tiger, not much to say in the notes right here. Gunslinger is just on it tonight. This seems like it's going to end up being a Scott Hartzok kind of night.
This is definitely a track that doesn't lend itself to the newcomers. So Mark Johnson's got a tough draw right here going up against a guy who will get around this track in great shape. We know that. Scott Hartzok and the Gunslinger. Matt talked earlier about Medusa rededicating herself to racing. Same thing with Gunslinger. Boy, you hear him come off the line so strong. But Scott had actually focused more on freestyle for a couple of years, and he seems to be back in the racer's mentality now.
Well, I'll tell you what, he just got out on Little Tiger there big time, man. When the light went green, he was definitely on the loud pedal and got out on him. Nice hole shot.
He will cut a light, there's no question about it. Scott Hartzok, the Floridian in the Gunslinger Ford, against Mark Johnson, the rookie driver in Little Tiger, and this one is all Gunslinger, as expected.
and it's the kind of track that he excels at. Again, you can't really slide the trucks out real bad, and that always suited Scott's driving style. He was one of the best at what we've been talking about this whole show, of just putting in clean, faster runs each round. Each time he hits the cars, he's going a little bit faster, make sure he can set up for that corner, and he's just getting across the finish line first in every case.
Scott Hartzok was a master of knowing exactly how to push your truck, exactly when to push your truck in a race. And he kind of knew right here that if he didn't mess up, he was going to move on to the next round, and that's exactly what happens right here. I love the interview, by the way. Hartzok's interview, he says, Gunslinger took him off his cage, didn't he, as far as the Tiger goes? And then we get a great question here, and this is one of the main reasons that I really liked Matt Steele. He goes, you're a long way from home. How is the weather affecting you? Of course, Scott Hartzok's down in Oldsmar, Florida, and now he's up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Robby, you can attest to it. It was cold in Minneapolis. There was snow and ice on the ground outside of this building. And now he's in here with a Florida-based truck, and he's putting a whooping on all these guys.
Scotty Hartzok in the Gunslinger truck, off to another good start. This could be another great night for you. You lined up against one of the hometown boys, and you took him out.
Yeah, exactly right. Little Tiger, you know, he's no stranger in Minneapolis. And that old Gunslinger just took him right off his cage, didn't we?
Yes, you certainly did, and I know you're a long ways away from home. How's the weather affecting you?
Yeah, it's not, you know. We won that Montreal deal, and if we can win Minneapolis, I could call it the M&M show. But, yeah, we got one more round to go, you know, and we're going to get the job done, I feel, and it's hammered down.
He can call it the M&M show, but if he starts rapping, I don't know what we're going to do. We're coming back with the semifinals. Medusa's in the house.
Yeah, Little Tiger, by the way, from Minneapolis. So,
exactly.
You know, the elements, if you will, are in that favor. But, yeah, that can always mess up engines. That can mess up timing. It can mess up a lot of things, you know, round to round. When it gets really cold like that, you're looking at tire pressure, you're looking at shocks, you're looking at all sorts of things that if you get moisture, if you get humidity, if you get a little heat, if you get a little cold, it can really throw some things off. And the thing about Hartzok that I always, you know, to your point, Josh, is how many times did he roll over in a corner?
Not many that I can remember.
Yeah, and how many times did the rest of this field roll over in corners? I mean, that's the ultimate. He's got the right setup, he's got the right attitude, and you know, he's not getting waterboarded very much when it comes to racing. He's always in the hunt. What
I love right here is Hartzok. He did win the previous show in Montreal, and he mentions that if he wins here, he's going to call it the M&M show. And as they go to break, Scott Douglas has a fantastic line. He goes, he can call it the M&M show all he wants, but if he starts rapping, I don't know what we're going to do. I love that exit for Scott Douglas right there. Brilliant exit going to commercial. We come back, though. It's semifinals time, gentlemen. And now we get to really see what Medusa has in her. She's got Gravedigger in the first semifinal matchup.
It's the student versus the teacher here with Dennis and Medusa. And, boy, I would say, you know, Dennis still definitely has to be the favorite showing up. But after that first set of cars, boy, you think it's all over again for Dennis Anderson, the way he crashes into that Pro Arena truck jump.
I tell you, he takes that first corner so well. And then when he lands off of that jump, it's just the truck is completely upset going into the next corner. And you think that's the mistake right there. Previous round, Neil Elliott makes a mistake against Medusa. She comes back and nips him at the line. Here, Dennis makes an even bigger mistake, arguably, but he comes back, and boy, he comes back in a big way. Dennis has yet another fantastic final corner, puts it all together, and, I mean, just kind of ends up beating Medusa pretty handily, honestly.
She was the fastest qualifier. She has been fast all night. But now, what's the pressure like in that cab with Medusa? Going up against the man who trained her, who showed her how to drive a monster truck. The legend, the icon, Dennis Anderson and Gravedigger.
Well, I promise you, the teacher will not take it easy on her. He will try to put her down and out. This should be a great race. Both drivers have had a look at this track now.
Anderson, who gets off the line like few others, but Medusa doesn't get cut short on the light either. I'll tell you, she really is getting that part of the game down. Oh, Anderson!
Whoa, way out of shape. Way out of shape. Hit one of those whoops over there. You can see him going around the freestyle stack there. They'll use that a little later in the show. And here comes Medusa across the line.
But he has come back strong. Look at him dirt track through there and flying. Anderson makes up for the bobble and wins convincingly over Medusa. Oh, hang on, Dennis. He slides and he's safe.
Boy, I'll tell you what, that track, you know, they're carrying so much speed to get across that finish line. It's hard to get them stopped in time, but He has learned to go wide and then chop down the inside of that turn, carry so much momentum. He gets on the throttle so much earlier, he gets across and wins it.
I think the race is won here in the second turn because we see, the camera's focused in on Medusa. Dennis is way out on the other end of the track, trying to gather the truck up. She makes, I'd call a very small mistake where she kind of checks up just a little bit, but it doesn't look visually like she loses that much time. And we stick with her on the camera across the line. And somehow Dennis has done some kind of like teleport move where he's like 5 truck lengths ahead after that set of cars. I don't know how he made up the time, all that.
Yeah, I have no idea how he made the time up there on the exit of that second corner going into the last corner. If you can kind of see in the background of when Medusa jumps over the cars and lands on the second time by, you can see Dennis in the background nosing over again and having another wild entry into the last turn. So how he makes up this time is just, you can't describe it.
He's comfortable drifting through the turns, and not a lot of people were. As you talked about with Little Tiger, for example, that's the difference between a veteran and a relative rookie. There is being comfortable, being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. The other thing I'm looking at as I'm looking through some of these images from the event is Dennis definitely had a very buffed down front 2 set of tires, and then he had the bead locks and a little more tread in the back. So I wonder if that was a little bit of something that played, to his advantage. He had a little bit of traction when he needed it, but not too much, as he talked about with Tony Farrell saying, I don't know if I picked the right thing. He had 4 tires that looked like Dennis's back ones, whereas Dennis and Bartle was famous for this too, shaving down the front tires a bit.
Our next race right here, Gunslinger and Wolverine. This is a battle of World Finals veteran trucks right here. Douglas actually calls this a budding rivalry within the sport, as we got the Ford Gunslinger taking on the Chevrolet Wolverine. A good Ford Chevy callback for all you veteran monster truck fans out there. An even start for both of these trucks. Bartle pushes it through the corner as he jumps. Hartzok is already landed, though, going into the next corner. The tires on the front of Wolverine, if you watch, he's bouncing a lot after his landing, whereas Gunslinger, smooth as silk. Jump, land, go.
Yeah, and the difference here, I think, is the attitude of the truck in the air. As we see Gunslinger land each time, he's landing fairly level, fairly even, and Wolverine's just nosing over too hard in the air. I'm not sure if it's the rear shock package or what on Wolverine, because, they want to set it up for slap wheelies later on, but it seems like the rear end's got a lot of rebound off the launch ramp, and he's just nosing in just enough that it kind of pogos the truck and can't get it settled down well for the corner.
Now, who will face Gravedigger in the finals? And these two guys, hey, here's the next great budding rivalry in the sport, I think. Gunslinger, the Ford, against the Chevrolet of Brian Bartle and Wolverine. And these two guys seem to be button heads every week now.
Brian Bartle at home, and of course Gunslinger fresh off a win. Who wants it more?
Those are 2 trucks with raw horsepower. You can hear it coming off the line, Ken.
No question, 1,600 horsepower bellowing out of these things, and both guys do a great job on the light.
They know they can't make a mistake. They know they're up against one of the best. That's what each of them is thinking. Hartzok looks strong. He had the edge that time by that finish line as they come around again. Bartle's got to make up some ground somewhere. It's Gunslinger. Scott Hartzok defeats the world champion. So in Montreal, he had to get a break. Wolverine beat him straight up, remember, but couldn't come out for the final, so Hartzok got the berth. This time, Gunslinger gets it done, mano a mano. And when we come back, Gunslinger and Gravedigger settle it in Mini.
And Scott Hartzok is going to play spoiler a little bit right here, because I think a lot of people, including myself, were thinking that we were going to see Dennis and Bartle in the finals. And Hartzok goes out here and defeats Wolverine, defeats the defending world champion, doesn't give us that rematch that we wanted from round 1. And it's going to end up being the smoothest driver all night long, Scott Hartzok, taking on the wildest driver all night long, and Dennis Anderson in your final.
Would you have it any other way?
Absolutely not. This is classic monster truck racing right here. It always seems like there's one wild guy that you really root for, and then there's that really smooth guy that you also really root for, but you're still kind of pulling for that wild guy. That's how it always seems to be in monster trucks, whether it's Dennis Anderson, whether it's Bill Payne nowadays is one of those guys that's just wild and crazy out there. I mean, it's something that is the root of this sport, and that's what we have right here in the final.
Yeah, and right away, the first thing I noticed about the final, and I thank my dad for these images
hang
as
on.
well.
The first thing you should notice about the final is that this is the point that I got up out of my seat right before this final, walked around the building and was like, "Where is that Robby Haught guy?"
Yeah, that was crazy, man. The first time I was like, who? Oh, hey, I've been talking
Hey, that's
to you.
the guy that always kicked my butt online. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, let's be honest, right? But yeah, so we did that, and I'm like, I was trying to lock in focus on the camera stuff and maybe have some pictures worth a damn, which debatable. But hey, it was fun, man. It was super cool. Lifelong friendship is an important thing to have in your life. That was great. Jeremy was shy, but also cool as well. And then we got to the finals, and the first thing I noticed was first turn, Dennis goes up on 2 wheels, and I think, oh boy, just a little bobble in the first turn, but after that, man, wide, fast, smooth, and especially the second turn, I felt like really, really made up for the first one.
Right before we go into the actual race here, I did want to point out the Scott Hartzok interview. Digger this, digger that. Well, Slinger is locked and ready to rock out here on this sticky track. Scott Hartzok was like Dr. Seuss sometimes, and that was one of his quotes right there I just had to share. As Robby says, though, Dennis is still wild in this pass. First turn, gets up on 2 wheels a little bit, and you think it's all over at that point. But Dennis jumps, lands, misses the tough truck jumps, and is set up perfect for the next corner. He makes that corner, jumps, lands just fine. And then in the last corner, Matt, he's on 2 wheels again, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, here's this guy in this smooth truck on the other side of the race. There's no way that Dennis Anderson can win this thing. Lo and behold, the roof camera is really what shows the win right here for Dennis, and it's by maybe a half a tire, if that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's go back and pick these trucks up halfway through. They're pretty even going into the final turn, and we see Dennis, he's only halfway through the corner, and he pitches it in a little bit early, and the truck rocks up on the 2 wheels, and he literally steers the front wheels around the pole while they're in the air, which is super impressive. As he brings the truck back down, the truck is all out of shape. You could tell he's fighting it, trying to get it back in line for the cars, and he just barely squeaks it out. I'm talking, less than half a tire length is the margin of victory here. And even to back up further, if we look at this first corner, I don't know if you guys were there, so maybe you remember, did they roll the track or anything with a roller before the finals? Because that first corner is packed down tight, and you can actually see the spotlight sheen off of it because it's so tacky.
Yeah, I actually thought that if I remember right, I thought they watered the track before the final.
Yeah, this was in the days where show flow wasn't even really much of a word. Not to say that it didn't flow, but there was plenty of time between rounds for breathers. There was time for people to work on trucks. There was time for people to water tracks down. There was time for the thing to be rolled because, as you mentioned before, they're doing pro arena trucks in the middle of it and in between rounds and stuff. So you got to think the pro arena guys, you can see the course, they're going through right where Dennis and Scott here are making their turns. So it would make sense somewhat for them to do that. At the same time, I've seen many a race where let's just say a Tom Mintz or somebody like that has been fooled by this and not seen it either, or not been able to adjust. Dennis adjusted, as Matt mentioned.
Scott Hartzok wants to make it 2 in a row, and he definitely wants to beat the Digger.
Now it's time for me and the Digger to get it on. Digger this, Digger that. Well, you know what? Slinger here is cocked, locked, and ready to rock on this sticky track.
Dennis Anderson's been up and down. I guarantee you, he is pumped to be in the finals. He wants to grab this victory, come out of here with a win over Hartzok and Gunslinger, and take some momentum into the new year.
You're taking on the Florida boys, Scotty Hartzok and the Gunslinger. You guys are no strangers to each other, man.
Oh, I know. Scott's smooth out here tonight, though. You can see he's not out of control.
No.
He's driving actually a little slower than we are, but he's making better time. He's cutting those corners real tight. I'm coming out slingshotting out of this turn down here. I'm hitting these other little mobiles from the stadium trucks, and it kind of bobbles me up in the turn, so I'm swinging wide. And if I swing wide with him like I did last round, I won't get to the finals. I got to kind of keep my cool, keep all 4 wheels on the ground, and then zip over those ramps straight.
Well explained by Anderson, and as we thought, no kids in this field. Two veterans, the Gravedigger Chevrolet, the Gunslinger Ford, for all the marbles in Minneapolis.
The Gravedigger going for his second win, as is Scott Hartzok and the Gunslinger. And we'll see if he changes his driving style right here. Looks like he's still swinging a little bit wide.
Let's see as they come across the line this time. Hartzok had a bit of an advantage to off the final turn. Here's where they're coming to that finish line. Can Digger make up the ground? They fly to the finish. I don't know who won. They came across the line together.
Incredibly close. There's no question that Dennis Anderson changed his driving style. He's doing donuts like he won. We'll definitely have to, and they're calling it a win for the Gravedigger. We're going to have to go back to the videotape and take a look at this one because it was too close for us to call.
Yeah, we got to take a look, see what the determination was here. Coming across. Wow. Boy, that's a tough one to call as they come across the line. Again, remember, going in opposite directions. That Ford finish line cuts right there. There's a shot of it.
There's a straight shot. You know, from the first angle, because of the angle of the camera, it looked as though he might not have won it. But as you look at it right there, there's the tire across the line on Gravedigger. And, of course, Gunslinger a little short.
Yeah, Dennis certainly adjusted here. Honestly, like you said, I believe they watered the track between rounds. That's what created that really pristine shine coming out of the corner for Anderson. And that was another detriment against Dennis right there, too. He had been flat tracking, trying to get around these corners, and now they're making it even tackier for him. And it shows he's on two wheels twice in this pass, and yet he still miraculously pulls off a win against a guy that was just incredibly smooth on the track the entire night. You got to wonder, though, if Hartzok may have took it a little easy himself in that pass, knowing that there was a little bit of extra moisture on the track.
It's very possible. You know, Dennis still, you know, at this point, he's already got Build, the icon, and we see, you know, the winner's interview here with Matt Steele. Racing's over. We're getting ready for freestyle. Dennis says, boy, that trash truck is going to be a killer.
And he ain't lying. Dennis, also, I think Dennis knew that he won the race miraculously because he immediately starts cutting donuts after he wins this race. And I hate that they call him the winner so early on television. He does the donuts, and then they say defeated Gunslinger in final round, and you're like, wait, what? They could have shown the replays first, built up a little more suspense before they actually announced him the winner, then showed his interview right there. But like you said, Dennis is absolutely not lying about the garbage truck, and Robby, I think we know the reason why, and so does Phil Foster to this very day.
So does the front end of Bulldozer. My goodness. I gotta say, though, I am a fan of a garbage truck or an unpredictable obstacle out there. I think that brings out the best in drivers. Sometimes it's going to dump a truck over, but I miss that. You know, I'm going to sound like the old school get off my lawn kind of guy, but I do miss that. You know, there's the classic argument that everybody makes. We'll bring back crush cars, all that. I'm not saying that as much as when it comes to freestyle, I want a couple of things that could create a problem for a truck or two. I want some danger and not to anybody's health, but I want a little bit of unpredictability when it comes to freestyle obstacles. A garbage truck was that and more. I do think that once Foster hit it, everybody went, maybe I won't touch that.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
But man, you know what? That's him in a nutshell, and that's him announcing his presence. That truck, let me tell you, definitely had to be front halved. And that was if you look at the replay.
Oh, in front of the chassis hanging off the truck.
To the shocks. And that is a hard hit too, so it's a good thing he's a big, strong farm boy slapping you on the back in Quincy, Illinois. You know, I mean, that is a Phil Foster run, and again, he brought that element too. What's he gonna do? How's it gonna go? I'm excited to watch this.
And there's so much more to this garbage truck thing, guys. Don't forget, we're in Minneapolis. Waste Management used to sponsor this event, and that's why we had garbage trucks out on the floor at these events for I forget how many years. So it was a sponsor tie-in for one. Then we get these incredible moments, you know, off of that obstacle as well. I'm sure that kind of reinforced the contract for another year. And Scott kind of calls out, you know, the lawn dart incident from Max D in New Orleans the year prior, which wasn't televised. And,
exactly.
You know, I think the better illusion is the lawn dart of this exact same truck, the exact same chassis in Pontiac just 2 years prior, a very similar hit where the truck gets tripped up on a hard edge of an obstacle like this. You know, in Pontiac's case, it was a bread truck, and here it's a garbage truck. But the truck goes in the same way. The difference here is the front of the frame finally collapses, and I think it kind of almost, dampens the blow a little bit for Phil. You see that the truck kind of goes down in stages as the frame collapses. I'm sure that did his body a little bit of a favor compared to Eldon, where the shock just went right into his chest.
Oh yeah, it had to have been a little bit of a stress reliever as far as his collarbones go.
So Depew, real quickly, Depew was, for those people that might, I don't know, put this in the comments section. Depew was Detroit, I believe, 2002. And then the lawn dart, what's that?
2001 in March.
2001, there you go. Because you see, together we're a genius. That's why we do this. So Detroit, Depew. And then the lawn dart we're talking about was Phil Foster, or I'm sorry, not Phil Foster, Neil Elliott in New Orleans. Same kind of deal, trips over the back, the back tires catch that bus and then send him into the ouchie.
Yes, ouch.
And that's kind of what happened there. I do believe, to your point too, it was at least a couple of years of Minneapolis having a garbage truck, and then I think this might have been the last show. I don't know if there were some concerns for safety or if the sponsorship just ended, but I went to Minneapolis almost every year, and it was always Subway and Waste Management, man. Shouts to Subway, dude. I would have liked to have seen them hit a big old sub out there or something.
I was going to say, why did they not put the giant inflatable sub sandwich out onto the track somewhere? I would have, I'd have paid a membership fee to watch a truck hit that thing. It was just awesome.
Yeah, again, to the unpredictability. But yeah, Foster, that's the way that you start a freestyle. I think it's great. They did at this time pick the order of freestyle. I like that. I like Foster as a good first choice to go out there and show people what's up.
Let's get started. Freestyle competition, and here's the guy who impressed us so much in Montreal, Phil Foster, and he's coming right out like a ball of fire. This guy, I tell you, he's already got it. He already understands. Tom Mintz has taught him well.
Bulldozer, one of the favorite trucks of the fans as well, and you mentioned it. Had a great run in Montreal. One of the most impressive saves we've ever seen. That has to be a lot of confidence inside of him coming off of something like that. Swings it a little wide there, but he did an awesome job there. We'll find out how he does here. Another big floor and a lot of big stuff to work with.
You see the red flames and the green mountain there? That's got a garbage truck in the middle of it. All the drivers have been leery-eyeing that, and Foster, I think, is going to go right after it. Here he comes. That thing is go-get.
Gas on it, baby. Man, oh man, what a hard hit. He hit the top of the truck with the back tires, and it kicked the back of the truck up in the air to the point that he endoed it.
Now we roll on with freestyle, and I'm going to come into the second highlight of the show because it was on so many highlight reels, and that's Dennis Anderson's run, obviously. Dennis has a really good run, and about 30 seconds left. He's got some steering issues. He kind of noses into the wall a little bit. They're calling him done on TV, and then all of a sudden he refires the truck, and you can hear the reaction to that refire on television, and it is a giant pop. As soon as that truck restarts, Dennis tries to cut a donut here. The rear steer is locked hard right. He spins into the donut. It hops up on that rear tire, that one rear tire, rolls up over onto the nose, comes back down on all fours, and just wads a 4-link bar on the left rear underneath that truck. That highlight was on the intro to this show. So they kind of gave away the end of freestyle right there as far as that goes. But man, it was classic Dennis Anderson. And what a way for him to go out in 14. He wins racing and he pulls off a wild hit that's going to be on highlight reels forever.
Right up over that trailer. There's nothing left of that thing now.
What a wild ride that is.
I'm glad I'm not that camera. It scared me to death and I'm not even on the truck.
Still 30 seconds on the clock and the digger is shut down. Is he done? There's a problem with the rear steer is what we're hearing over the U.S. hot rod radios. The officials are talking about it. Something not right with the rear steer. And again, as we discussed, Ken, these trucks have that toggle switch that actually steers the rear wheels independently from the front wheels. And that's the problem for Gravedigger. They're holding the clock, as they will do for every competitor if he can refire, and they'll let him finish in a situation like that. He's going to try.
Yeah, there's switches on the trucks that have been problems in the past, but now they're very well hidden so that they don't get damaged. I mean, just the smallest of a little electrical switch, and if it gets damaged, then it won't center itself, and that's exactly what's happening here. That rear end is not centering itself, but as you can see, it's still functioning, so he will get the best out of it.
Yeah, he just wanted to give these fans a wild finish, and he gave them one.
Oh!
He said the rear steer's broke anyway.
That's right.
Let's
Might as
just
well
tear
kick
the
it
rest
out.
of it up. Yeah.
We'll make it easy to get to so they can work on it.
Oh, is he something else?
And they did use him on a highlight reel for quite some time in TV commercials and various other promotional stuff for Monster Jam. So they got at least their money's worth out of that torn up fiberglass and metal that night. And, there's some other interesting items in freestyle. We got some power wheelies out of Gunslinger riding the whole way across the floor. That's one of my favorite things. And interesting to see that nobody really fills the time, the entire field really, other than Rage and Steele, until we get to Max D.
Yeah,
and
Max D, Neil Elliott.
Neil goes through a camper trailer, and man, I can't imagine what it's like to clean one of them things up. And I've got a story for this, because when I was riding with Dennis last year down at his shop in the Extreme King Sling truck, one of the guys that was in our group was Tom Gunther, who's friends with Dennis, and he follows Monster Jam all over the country. He's one of the super fans, him and his family, great people. And Dennis was talking about the Mid-America show that they were getting ready to do with the Disharoons. And Tom says, hey, you guys are going to be doing freestyle there. Do you guys want a camper? I have one extra that, is junk and is going to go to the scrap heap. And Dennis says, nah, I don't want it, because that means I got to clean it up.
They hurt to run through. They are somewhat dangerous.
Shake hands with danger.
Regardless of how much you strip them down. And as you said, they suck to clean up. I remember some stories kind of similar to what you're talking about, where it looks amazing. Fans really liked it, but it was a very big hassle. And I'm not just talking about, you got to pick up the stuff. I'm talking about, you got to remember, stuff can fly in there. I remember Lupe Sosa talking about wearing goggles, looking like David Morris back in the day, when he knew he was going to have an opportunity to hit one of those. And it looked cool visually, really neat. And that was something that was actually on the intro of Monster Jam for a while too, was Max D running through the camper.
And no trucks fly any better than the Maximum Destruction trucks. These things are designed for air, designed to fly, and they work very, very well.
I think they're also designed to get up on two wheels. These guys get up that way and save it more than probably anybody on the circuit. He's still got 45 seconds, plenty of time to wow the judges and this crowd, even though he really hasn't gotten any momentum going because of the problem. Oh, he's backing up.
He's looking for something
no,
right
he's
here.
He's looking for that big trailer, that motorhome there. Oh my! I hope
the family that was in there is out.
That's well, I hope they didn't leave too many souvenirs behind, any clothes or anything hanging on top of Max.
Look at the air! I mean, he just matted the throttle, hit those cars as hard as he could, and got monster air out of that thing.
The moments were cool, but overall, I gotta say personally, might be a hot take. Looking back on this, it was a pretty disappointing freestyle because of breakage. You had Bartle breaking a 4-link bar. You had a couple of, Blue Thunder, bad hit over the bus, hurts the rear end. A couple of the heavy hitters really went out early, and I felt like, okay, once Elliott's run was done, I thought, okay, if Dennis fills the time, then he wins. Well, we saw what happened. More breakage, and it's kind of, you're hyped up, and then you go, oh, man, I really wanted to see him run full time. Breakage sometimes is going to do that.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, you got a big-time highlight out of that whole show right there. To touch on the camper thing, I used to love that site. I used to think it was amazing. And then, Robby, you and I were at the same show in Joliet where a board comes through and almost decapitates Steve Kohler. And right after that, I was done with those things. I could care less if I ever see one come out again. Never thought that could have happened. But, man, that in-cab shot of him, that board just missing him, it still gives me chills to this day.
When you're looking at stuff like that, I mean, you kind of got to be careful with what you say, because, it can sound more dramatic than it is. In that case, it was just as dramatic, and I didn't realize it until after the show. I have some images where there is a 2x4 through what people used to call bulletproof Lexan. It's not bulletproof. I'll tell you that.
Definitely not 2x4 proof.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, there's a line there, definitely.
Yeah, and regardless of how cool it looks and how easy it looks like the trucks go through them, we're still talking about, structural wood and fiberglass and a lot of other dangerous materials. So, I mean, if you've got the opportunity to not shake hands with danger, you ought to take it and keep the floor clean while we're doing it.
Exactly. And ladies and gentlemen, this show was phenomenal. Guys, we're only going to rate the racing portion of this show. And to me, I felt like it was a perfect racing bracket to watch. However, there are so many close-up zoom-in shots where you almost scream at the TV sometimes and say, "Come on, guys, back it out so you can kind of see the action." The course was tight enough that you could see it. And thank God we had the downward angle camera right on the replay and the finish line so we could see just how close that final round was, because none of the angles they really show on TV do that final justice from the side. So honestly, I got to rate the racing portion of this show a 7 out of 10. I thought, like I said, the camera work could have been a whole lot better. And to me, that just almost kills what this racing bracket could have been had they shown a wider broadcasting angle. Matt, you go ahead.
Rob, you go ahead. I'll wrap up.
I was waiting for that. I was going to do the same thing. It's all good. I would say I'm at about a 7 as well, Josh. And I definitely agree with you. When it comes to in-cab shots and close-ups and things like that, save those for the replays. For the love of God, let me see what I came to see, which is to see the trucks race and see how close it is and see what's going on with the course. I want to see the details, and I want to feel like I'm there live. I don't want to feel like I'm watching a too much produced, too much edited version of a show. I've gone to some of these shows, and then I've watched back the television production, and with all due respect to everybody that puts those things together, because I know some of them, I know they work really hard, I agree with you 100%. It could have been, it's a 7 that could have been a 9 when you watched it back.
Easily, yes.
As the only impartial judge of this event, since I wasn't there.
Okay, listen, he's rubbing his chest as he's talking here.
You know, you guys know that I'm not quite as big on a lot of the newer stuff that was produced in-house by Clear Channel and Live Nation, because once they brought the production inward after the 2002 season, I feel like a lot of the, not even the charm, but the production value in terms of the way that they built the story just wasn't quite there anymore. And that is the biggest thing for me in the speed era, where a lot of these shows, I only have ever seen them once. They, to me, had no rewatch value. In this case, you know, it's a good show. The racing itself is pretty good. Again, Chicago style has no place in anything other than a hockey arena. So, you know, between that and the production, I'm giving this guy a 5 out of 10.
Oh, I will say something, and this is, I guess you'd say a little inside baseball, if you want to call it that. I did have a chance. I talked about Matt Steele, St. Louis show a while back. It was him and Sarah Daly at the time running that show and doing stuff for it. And I got to have a few kind of behind the scenes chats with Matt. And one of the things that was a source of frustration for him was he wanted to ask certain questions. He wanted to you know, progress like you were talking about with the storylines and the drama and things like that, and was shut down and told not to do certain things or ask certain questions. I spitballed a few questions to him just, you know, based on who was there at the time. And he said, yes, exactly, but we can't, we're not allowed. And I remember at this show as well, they were doing some pre-show stuff with Dennis. I think I've talked about this before, but I'm not sure. Forgive me if it is. They said, who's your favorite truck to drive against? And he said Bigfoot. Somehow that didn't make it on the telecast.
I can't imagine
that kind of
why.
speaks to, you know, I mean, you're poking the bear there directly if you do that. I get it, but it's kind of indicative of how things were treated at that time. You know, I like stories. I like drama. I miss guys not liking each other on the track, you know, and that's something that's sorely missing today. Everybody doesn't need to be friends. You need to say that you want to beat that guy, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you right there.
Josh, I think we need to have Robbie on the show more, because he basically, in more words, said, I'm right.
Hey, I'm down.
Hey, by the way,
say exactly, man.
Robbie, how would you like to be the new co-host? No, I'm just kidding.
I
will say this.
I think Matt should do it. Did I do that right?
Oh, yeah. Hey, funny. Good guy. Good guy. He's supposed to be my friend. But anyway, to close the show out, I actually sent a message to Adam Anderson yesterday evening before I got to close up my shop and everything. I sent a message to Adam and I said, hey, you were there. This is before Adam started driving. He was there with his dad. I said, do you remember anything about this show? I got a 4-word response. The garbage truck. A 3-word response. Sorry, the garbage truck.
That's 3 words.
Yeah.
I think Josh hit the garbage truck, and that's what.
That's exactly what it is. I'm hitting the garbage truck. That's why it's the end of the show. We'll see y'all again on the tracks across America.
Do you have any commercials, guys?
Commercials.
You got All Monster podcast, right?
Oh yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
Podcast
Hey,
hosted by Robby Haught over here, the esteemed gentleman. Him and Dustin Hart do a phenomenal job on that.
Yeah,
feel free, come on over. Both of you, come on over. We got plenty to talk about over there as well. Love to have you guys on and really enjoyed this one today. Thank you guys for listening.
A lot of fun. Make sure you check out the International Monster Truck Hall of Fame. Tickets are on sale for this year's induction. It's going to be a great event this year at the new home in Butler, Indiana. And make sure you tune in next week. The Retro Monster Truck Review. We're covering Monster Trucks 2000, the new Thrillinium. That's one you can't miss.
Yep, can't miss that one. We'll see you all again on the tracks across America. I'm waiting for Matt to do his normal random thing at the end of the show.
Nah, I skipped out because we have a guest.
Oh, he's bashful.
This is all staying in, just so you know. Good night, everybody.